What's good, R&B squad? This is Heart of Ruth. I trust that this message meets you guys in good spirits. If you are new to this family, welcome. We don't believe that you're here by accident. We're happy to have you, and Jesus is, of course, always happier. To my returning listeners, welcome back to you guys. Thank you for stopping by again. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say I only have one channel on here. If you're looking for me, you search for Heart of Ruth, or you search for my channel handle, Heart of Ruth 6640. That's Heart of Ruth 6640. I only have one channel on here. If you guys see anything from me, my voiceovers, my videos, my posts, anything appearing anywhere else, just know that that is not my channel. This is my only channel. That being said, once again, while you listen to this, you will know whether or not this message is for you. Please eat the meat, spit out the bone, take what's for you, and leave the rest. And more importantly, please ensure that you're praying as you listen so that you may receive direct confirmation from the Lord as to whether or not this word is for you. This word is a kingdom marriage word, and it will also double as a general word because it will call upon you to use discernment when it comes to whom you're connected to and whom you stay connected to, okay? And it is also, there's also a dream that I had that the Lord used to deliver this word to me. And he also had me heavily in the word for the past couple days regarding this particular word. So, sometimes I have to laugh because it's the way that God, he literally will drill me like I'm studying for an exam. He will drill me and have me memorizing stuff like an exam is coming up and I have to pass at all costs. And that's really what this is. This is really me, the Lord schooling me so that I can get on here and deliver these words to you guys. I mean, I can't wait to meet him. I honestly can't wait to meet the Lord face to face. I'm going to be like, oh, so you're the dude who drills me like an exam is coming up. Because I'm sorry. It's so funny the way God does it. So for this particular word, right, I'm brushing my teeth and he's like, by the way, remember Jonathan and David and their situation? And then I'm eating, right? And he's like, oh, do you remember Delilah and Samson? Remember them? And he can basically drop in at any time, regardless of what I'm doing, and expand on the word that he's building for me. Okay? So that's what happened with this particular word. Now, let me get into the dream and that I can get into the interpretation and the word that comes along with it. In this dream, I saw a woman and there was a man. And I saw that this woman and this man kept attempting to go on a date. Okay? So in the first scene, they were actually on the phone. They were talking to each other and they were arranging to meet up and have a date. When the day came for that to happen, something came up on his end and they weren't able to go to that date. Now, there was another instance, the scene switched, there was another instance where they were talking about making up for that date that they missed. This time, when they tried to make up for it, something came up on her end. And every time these two people kept trying to make this date happen, something would come up and prevent them from doing so. Until eventually they found or they realized that it didn't make any sense and they stopped trying. And I came away from what I was seeing in that scene, in that dream. However, before I came away from what I was seeing, the Lord made me understand very clearly that the reason why these two people were not able to have this date, things kept coming up, was not because the enemy was interfering, but because they weren't meant to be connected to each other like that. The connection just wasn't meant to happen. Okay? And then I came away from what I was seeing in those scenes in that dream. So for those of you whom this is for, this is not going to be an easy word to swallow. But for those of you whom it is for, I pray to God it reaches you and that you're able to digest it. because it's very important. So for someone, you are either trying to connect to someone that God did not ordain to be in your life, or you are currently connected to someone that God did not ordain to be in your life. This could be a romantic interest, or it could be a friend. In some instances, it could be a business associate. It could even be a family member, a relative of some sort. But there is some connection in your life that was not ordained by God, and you keep trying to make it work, and it's not working out, not because the enemy is interfering, but because God is trying to block you from something that is not for you. And that is why I said this is not going to be easy to swallow. All right. The Lord himself, and you will know this is for you because the Lord himself has been talking to you and sending you signs, sending you hints, letting you know that this connection is not of him. But you want it so badly. That's the thing. You want it so badly that you have convinced yourself that the interference you're seeing happening is coming from the enemy. No, it's from God. It is from God. And I need you guys, before you take this word and run with it, make sure that it is for you. Because listen, some of you are in situations where it's difficult for you to come together with someone, and it really is because of enemy interference. And it really is that person is meant for you. However, for those of you whom this word is for, you are trying to force a connection that is not of God. God did not ordain it. He did not ordain it. And here's the thing. Sometimes when God doesn't ordain a connection and that connection is not meant for you, it doesn't even necessarily mean that person is a bad person. It just means that what you will be entering into with them is a soul tie and not a soul knit. Do you understand? And God cannot approve of soul ties. He only ordains soul knits. That is why it is so important. If you are connected to someone right now, and this is already resonating with you, you're connected to someone and you feel in your spirit that the Lord has been telling you this isn't for you, but you've been stubborn and you've been ignoring it, it is very possible, entirely possible, that you are involved in a soul tie and not a soul knit. Let's make the differentiation between a soul knit and a soul tie. Soul knits are ordained by God. Soul ties are not. When you enter into a soul tie, it's either you entered yourself into it or the enemy entered you into it. Either way, God does not approve of it. Okay? And let me tell y'all something else. You know what is the difference between a soul knit and a soul tie? Here's how you know the difference. Soul knits always produce fruit. Soul ties do not. Soul ties are barren. They're fruitless. That's exactly the word that the Lord gave to me about that scene in that dream. These two people in my dream, in that scene in that dream, their attempts to come together were fruitless. And even if they had come together, the union would be fruitless. It wouldn't bear any fruit, not unto God, because it wasn't ordained by him. There are people in relationships, people in positions, people who are trying to hold on to a friendship, people who are trying their best to reconnect with a family member and stay connected to them. And they're wondering, why is it that it's so difficult? Because God is not in it. He's not in it. And I'm not saying that if God is in something, it's going to be easy. It's not. If it's a soul knit, it's still not going to be easy. But whenever it is a soul tie and not a soul knit, it's a connection that is not from God. It's a different level of hard. Do you understand? It is a different level of hard. And if you know, you know exactly what I mean by that. It is it's hard on an entirely different level. You actually feel that you're trying to do it in your own strength. You feel that. You feel as if God has put up a brick wall and you can't reach him where this is concerned. That's exactly how you feel. You literally feel like you're cut off from God when you're trying to make this connection work. And that is because you are. God cannot bless a soul tie. He can only bless soul knits. How you will know that something is a soul tie and not a soul knit is that it does not bear fruit. Soul ties do not go anywhere. They don't go anywhere. So let's talk a little bit more about what actually causes soul ties. Okay? Now, let me describe for you guys what a soul tie can feel like. A soul tie can feel like this, and let me know down in the comments if you understand, if you've been through this. You may have this person coming into your life like a revolving door back and forth. Every time you shut the door on them or they shut the door on you, one of you forces the door open again. Pay attention to that. One of you forces the door open again. It doesn't just open by itself. And once that door is forced open again, once that door is ajar, that person has the opportunity to come back into your life. That connection has the opportunity to come back into your life. And you spend time with them. And for a fraction of a minute, it feels good. It feels good to be reconnected to this person. But then when you come away from them, when you come away from that interaction, how do you feel? Let me know down in the comments, how do you feel? It goes a little something like this. You come away from the connection and you feel depleted. You feel like this was pointless. What was the point of this? Why did we reconnect again if this is what it was going to be like? Those are the questions that come into your mind. You feel drained. You feel sick. Some of you start feeling physically sick. You've got symptoms of anxiety. Your panic is through the roof. You see this person, your heart starts palpitating. Okay? You hear somebody mention them in connection to something that is not too pleasant. Whether that might be their behavior or something like that, you start to feel sick to your stomach. You guys know what I'm talking about. But yet still, even though you feel like that every time, and each time you reconnect with them, it gets worse. Even though you feel like that every time you reconnect with this individual, you still keep forcing the door open, or they still keep forcing the door open. That is what a soul tie feels like. You know it's bad for you, but you have all of this trouble letting go. Now in the world, by worldly definition, they'll call it a trauma bond. That's what you might hear. But here in the body of Christ, around here, we know that there's something deeper than that going on. We know there's a whole spiritual aspect behind this. We know that what the world considers a trauma bond is actually, in actual reality, a soul tie. Here in the body of Christ, we want to call it what it is. We want to unmask the real demon behind it. Yes and amen? So it's not a trauma bond. It is a soul tie. And let me tell you what else. Here's how soul ties happen. Soul ties happen when you either bond with somebody on a level you had no business bonding with them on, and it released all kinds of chemicals and all sorts of spirits, like spirit transferring of spirits, or it occurs when you enter into ungodly covenant with this individual. Okay? Now, in ancient times, people would come together and agree on something, and they'd form a covenant by a handshake. Some of you got people touching on you. I need you to understand how serious touch is. You've got people touching on you, holding your hand, hugging you, embracing you. You are entering unknowingly into spiritual covenant with these individuals, and God didn't ordain it. Be careful of that. Back in ancient times, they formed a covenant in some instances by a handshake. Do you understand? Do you see how important touch is? Now let's talk a bit about sex. All right. In biblical times, how a man and a woman would seal the covenant of their marriage was that there would be a shedding of blood and exchanging of bodily fluids. Yes, we're going to keep it all the way 100. Now, the wife was expected to be virginal when the couple married, and how they would seal their bond, how they would seal the covenant, the three-way covenant between them and God, is that they would make love on their wedding night. And the wife, of course, would bleed because that would be her first time. And the shedding of the blood and the exchanging of bodily fluids is what would seal the covenant. Do you understand how sacred the act of sexual intercourse is? It seals a covenant. So you're out here sharing bodily fluids with somebody. Let's keep it all the way 100. Just because we're in the body of Christ, that don't mean slip-ups don't happen. Some of y'all are out here exchanging bodily fluids with people, entering into ungodly covenants with people that God never intended to be in your life. And now when you hand things over to God, when you hand the reins back over to God, He will break them covenants that are not of Him by any means necessary. By any means necessary. Whatever He got to do to break those covenants, He's going to break them. Do you understand? So, for whomever this is for, you are connected to someone. You are in a soul tie with someone that God did not ordain to be in your life. And that could look like anything. For some of you, this is how it happens. Let's even move away from the topic of relationships, romantic relationships for a minute. Some of you are bonded to, connected to, in a soul tie with friends and family that God don't want in your life. He doesn't want those people in your life. That wasn't ordained by Him. And yes, it could be family too. Even if it's family, there are some family members that God doesn't want around you because of where He's taking you. That's hard to hear, but it's the truth. Some of you have friendships, business connections, family connections that God did not ordain. And you are in a soul tie with these individuals because you keep going back and you keep reopening the door and they keep reopening the door. And every time it feels worse. Every time it gets worse. It bears no fruit. A soul tie bears no fruit. A soul knit bears fruit. That's how you know the difference. God can bless a soul tie. So what do we got here? We got Ruth and Boaz. And then on the other end, we've got Samson and Delilah. Okay? Let's look at some examples of soul knits versus soul ties. And before we even get into the biblical example, we've talked about soul ties. Now let's talk about soul knits a little bit. How you know something is a soul knit and not a soul tie is it bears fruit. It bears fruit. You can see the hand of God in it. Now, another distinction is that more often than not, your soul is knit to this person long before you guys ever touched each other. There is no sexual intercourse, no sexual intimacy involved, but your soul is knit to this person long before that even happens. Y'all ever had the kind of connection where you literally have no reason at all for this person to stay in your heart? They have no reason for you to stay in theirs, but you can't forget each other? There is no sex happening. Sometimes there isn't even any communication. Nothing is happening. And somehow you can't forget this person. And because you can't forget them, God prompts your spirit to pray for them. That's how you know that's a soul knit and not a soul tie. Many times a soul tie happens because of some kind of ungodly exchange that took place. Many times a soul tie occurs because of some kind of ungodly connection, some sort of ungodly bond that took place. Sometimes it involves sex. More often than not, it does involve sex, or it involves you bonding over something that is not godly. Another thing, some of you are bonding with people, connecting with them, forming soul ties with them, simply because they can relate to something that you're going through. Just because someone can relate to something that you're going through doesn't mean God ordained for them to be in your life. Whether that's a friendship, business associate, colleague, relationship, whatever it is. And on that note, let's talk about soul knits. So here are some biblical examples of soul knits, and I'm going to go into my notes here. Let's look at Jonathan and David. And this is in the first book of Samuel, chapter 18, verse 1, and it reads, this is going to be in the description box. Now, when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved David as his own soul. That is an example of a friendship that was ordained by God, and their souls were knit to each other. Jonathan could not explain why he loved David so much. He loved David the same way that he loved himself. That was the level of brotherly love that he had for David. And he couldn't explain it. He couldn't explain why he went against his father. Why he was more loyal to David in that instance than he was to his own father. He can't explain that. He couldn't explain it. Oh, Dennis the dog is with me, guys. So you're going to hear him in the background. He'll be quiet in a minute. But Jonathan, if you were to ask Jonathan to explain why exactly he was more loyal in that instance to David than he was to Saul, his own father saw this young man as an enemy, and he loved the young man who was allegedly the enemy of his father so much that he was willing to spare his life and go against his own father's wishes. Jonathan couldn't explain that, but it was because God put that love for David in Jonathan's heart. He knit their souls together. And you know what was fruitful about that? That put David on the fast track to becoming king. Because he had Jonathan's protection, it saved his life and it put him on the fast track to becoming king. If that is not an example of a soul knit bearing fruit, I don't know what is. So that is one example. Let's look at another one. We can also look at Pharaoh's cupbearer and Joseph. Y'all remember the story of Joseph, how Joseph was in prison? Now, while Joseph was in prison and he was in there, he was wrongfully thrown into prison because Potiphar's wife lied about him. So he was in prison. He wasn't supposed to be in there. And even while he was in prison, even while he was under attack from the enemy, God found a way to use it. And he placed people strategically in Joseph's life while he was in prison. So while David was in prison, I'm sorry, not David, Joseph. While Joseph was in prison, Joseph met these two gentlemen who were connected to Pharaoh. One of them was Pharaoh's baker, his chief baker. The other was his cupbearer. Now, the chief baker, he didn't make it, but the cupbearer did. And in prison, Joseph and the cupbearer, their souls had been knitted to each other. That was a godly connection. Their souls had been knitted to each other. The cupbearer developed a profound respect for Joseph because Joseph had a gift that God allowed to shine through even when he was in difficult circumstances. And that gift, that ability Joseph had to interpret the dream of the cupbearer, that caused the cupbearer, that triggered a certain amount of respect in that cupbearer for Joseph. And so his soul was knit to Joseph's soul. And when he left that prison, that soul knit played an integral role in Joseph being set free. You see, when he got released from prison, the cupbearer, for a minute there in his celebratory phase, he may have temporarily forgot about Joseph, But that's the thing. When it's a soul knit, you can only forget for a little while. You'll only forget that person for a little while. It's transitional. The minute the Lord jogs your spirit, he jogs your memory, you remember them again. And that's how you know it's a soul knit and not a soul tie. So the cupbearer gets out of prison. He temporarily forgets Joseph because he's celebrating his newfound freedom, or his freedom that he's found once again. But the minute the Lord jogs his memory and Pharaoh has a dream that needs to be interpreted, that is when the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And that respect he had for Joseph, that soul knit, made him mention Joseph's name in the ear of someone who literally had the ability to set Joseph free and elevate him. And that's how Joseph became a free man. That's how he received all of the blessings that he received, because the Lord used a divine connection, the connection between him and the cupbearer. He used that soul knit to bear fruit in Joseph's life. And not only that, but also to save a whole bunch of people, including Joseph's own family, because a famine came shortly after that. And it was it was through Joseph that those people didn't starve to death. All right, let's look at Ruth and Naomi. That's an example of a soul knit. Let's look at the two of them. Ruth and Naomi had a soul knit that was one of the most beautiful connections to ever be recorded in the Word of God. That was a beautiful connection. And let me tell you something about soul knits. Sometimes they don't bear fruit right away. For those of you who may be in a soul knit and not a soul tie, and let's say that you are in separation from that person that your soul is knitted to, or you're standing for somebody, you're standing for your love, you're standing for a family member, you're standing for a friend, and you don't see any fruit coming from it, don't be too quick to think that God didn't ordain it. Sometimes a soul knit will not bear fruit right away, but eventually, if you're patient and you wait, it will bear fruit. Do you think that soul knit between Ruth and Naomi bared fruit? Ruth took an oath to Naomi. She said to Naomi, she said, "Wherever you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." She took an oath in front of God to Naomi. Her love for Naomi caused her to enter into this oath, into this soul knit. And her loyalty led her straight to God. Okay? But initially, it didn't bear fruit. In the beginning, that soul knit did not bear fruit. And I'm sure that there were days where Ruth, she questioned herself. She probably asked herself, what did I get myself into? Here she was in this foreign land. She didn't know any of these people. She had this elderly woman to take care of. So she now has a dependent. She has no husband. She has no family other than this elderly lady who's her dependent. And now she has to go look for work so that they don't both starve. So I am sure there were days where Ruth asked herself, what did I get myself into? But her love and her loyalty, her unexplainable love and loyalty to Naomi, that soul knit is what kept her going on the hardest days. I want y'all to go and look up how difficult gleaning was. We hear about Ruth gleaning, but we don't fully understand unless we do the research what gleaning took. The effort it took, the exertion, being out there in the heat of the day, gleaning. And she was a young woman and she didn't know anyone. She could have gotten hurt. She went out looking for work by herself. But God protected her and he preserved her and he gave her favor. He showed her favor because she was in a soul knit with Naomi and not a soul tie. All right. And eventually that soul knit did what? It started to bear fruit because then she met Boaz. So now she was already in a soul knit with Naomi. And now she entered into a soul knit with Boaz. Notice they didn't have no sex. Sex didn't even happen. But as soon as Boaz laid eyes on her, he started showing her favor. And she didn't even understand what was going on. She said to him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes? I'm a stranger in this land. Why have I found such favor in your eyes?" And Boaz chalked it up to the fact that her reputation or her character preceded her. But in reality, that was a soul knit that had formed between him and this woman that was about to be his wife. So I need you to understand something for those of you who are under the sound of my voice right now. Where your God-ordained spouse is concerned, the Lord knits the two of you together. Even before you meet, your soul is already knitted together. That's why it feels unlike anything you've ever felt when you meet this person. When you come into contact with them, it feels like nothing you've ever felt. And you can see the hand of God in it, even in the difficulties, even in the separations. You can see the hand of God. There are some things that will happen that it's going to be hard to deny to anyone, especially to you, that it was God. You're going to know. You are going to know. Because Ruth was in that soul knit with Naomi and also then with Boaz, look how much fruit it produced. It produced so much fruit that Jesus Christ in human form came from the lineage of Ruth. That's how much fruit this soul knit between Naomi and Ruth, and then between Ruth and Boaz, this is how much fruit it produced. So a soul knit will always produce fruit. No matter how long it takes, it will always produce fruit. You will not be laboring in vain. Ruth was not gleaning in vain. All right? Let me see what else we got here. Let's look at Jesus and John the Baptist. That was an example of an anointed soul knit between family members. John the Baptist was not just a great prophet. He was also Jesus' cousin. Okay? His earthly cousin. Mary and Elizabeth were cousins, and John the Baptist was the cousin of Jesus. And these two young men, they were both in ministry around the same time, and their souls were knit to each other. Sometimes you start off in the same vessel, aboard the same boat as someone, and then eventually your destinations take you to two different places. That does not mean that the soul knit ends. You see, John the Baptist and Jesus, they basically started out on the same boat, aboard the same vessel, but their ministries took them in two different directions. They were both serving the Lord, both ministering unto the Lord, but their ministries took them in two very different directions. Right about the time that Jesus' ministry was taking off, John the Baptist was put into prison. And what did Jesus do? He pulled aside and he grieved when he heard what John the Baptist was going through. And then when he heard of John the Baptist's death, he grieved even more. When you have a soul knit with someone, whatever they're going through grieves you as if it's your own body that's going through it. Do you understand? When it's a soul knit, anything that happens to that person, if they get cut, figuratively speaking, you bleed. That's how you know it is a soul knit. So let's talk a bit now about some biblical examples of soul ties. Okay? We got Samson and Delilah. Samson, because of his ungodly soul tie to Delilah that was not approved by God, ended up losing not just his strength, but he lost his life. And this is exactly what is meant by a soul tie never produces fruit. Let's look at Jezebel and Ahab. Ahab was raised in the house of Israel. He went and married Jezebel, who was raised in pagan worship. And he rejected the Lord because of his marriage to Jezebel. He did some of the most horrendous things because of his marriage to Jezebel. He almost lost his life because of his marriage to Jezebel. This is the kind of thing that an ungodly soul tie can cause. You open yourself up to all kinds of ungodly influences and activities when you are in an ungodly soul tie. And every soul tie is ungodly. Every soul tie. It's only approved by God if it's a soul knit. It is only approved by God if it is a soul knit. All right? So again, for those of you whom this is for, you are in an ungodly soul tie. You have a connection to someone. This could be a romantic partner, a potential romantic partner, a current romantic partner, one that you're in separation from. Or it could be a friendship connection. It could be some family member that you keep trying to make things work with. Whatever this connection is, it is not of God. And this is why it's not working. God is trying to block you. He's trying to protect you from entering into covenant with something or someone that he did not ordain to be in your life. All right? And that's the word, guys. I hope that this message blessed someone. I hope it reached the right ears. I love you guys. I will be back with another word as soon as the Lord releases me. Take care.